It was late October when Daniel first moved into that old farmhouse on the edge of town. The kind of place you drive past and swear the paint has been peeling like that since the 70s. He wasn't looking for anything fancy, just cheap rent and quiet. The landlord was more than happy to let it go for next to nothing. And Daniel, well, he didn't ask many questions. The first night was nothing special. A couple boxes still in the hallway. Dinner was just leftover pizza. He sat on the couch scrolling through his phone until he dozed off. Then something woke him. It wasn't a loud bang or some horror movie scream. It was soft, barely there, like humming. A woman's voice, carrying a tune he didn't recognize. It was coming from upstairs. He froze. Every house makes noises, right? Pipes, wind, whatever. But humming, that's not the house, that's a person. He grabbed the nearest thing, some cheap broom he left by the wall, and crept up the steps. The hallway was colder than downstairs, like someone had opened a window. At the very end, the light from the bathroom flickered once. Twice, then went steady. He stepped closer. And that's when he saw her. She was standing by the farthest window, pale skin catching the moonlight like porcelain. Her hair was long, dark, a little messy. She turned her head, and her eyes met his. Daniel's stomach knotted. He knew in that instant she wasn't alive. There was something about the way the edges of her form seemed to blur slightly, like fog. But she didn't lunge at him, didn't moan or screech. She just smiled, a small, almost shy smile, then turned back to the window. Daniel did what any rational person would. He left, or at least tried to. But when he went downstairs, the living room wasn't quite the same. His boxes had been unpacked, his coffee mug was washed and sitting in the sink. Someone she had lit a candle on the table. It didn't make sense. But nothing after that night really did. Days turned into weeks. Sometimes, when he came home from work, the smell of fresh bread filled the air. He never bought any. He'd find a blanket folded neatly at the foot of his bed that he didn't own. One evening, he left his guitar out, and the next morning, the strings were tuned perfectly. He started talking to her, not because he expected a reply at first. He didn't even know if she could hear him. But she'd answer in her own way, a glass of water appearing when he mentioned being thirsty. His favorite book, the one he lost years ago, suddenly sitting on his nightstand. One night, after a long day, he finally asked, "What's your name?" When he woke up, there was a note on the kitchen counter. The handwriting was delicate, old-fashioned. Elena, they built a strange friendship. Some nights, she'd hum that same haunting melody until he fell asleep. Other nights, she'd simply be there, sitting in the armchair by the fire, watching him quietly with that same small smile. Daniel thought about her constantly. Not in the way you'd think, although, if he was honest, she was beautiful. It was more comfort. She was the calm in his lonely little world. But the truth was heavier than either wanted to admit. One cold night, as rain hammered the windows, Daniel finally asked, "Why are you still here?" For the first time, her smile faded. She crossed the room, stopping just a breath away from him. He could almost feel the air shift, cooler somehow. She whispered soft, like petals brushing together, "I don't know how to leave." He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck. Instead, he reached out. His fingers passed right through her hand, but for a moment, for just a second, he swore he felt warmth. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about how wrong it all was, how she was trapped in a place she didn't belong, how maybe he was selfish for wanting her to stay. The next morning, he started looking into the history of the house. Library records, old newspapers. He found her. Elena Moore died in 1976, 24 years old. Tragic accident, a fire in the farmhouse. The details were vague, no surviving family, but one clipping mentioned a fiancé who never recovered from losing her. And suddenly, Daniel understood the humming. It was a lullaby from an old folk song, one Elena's grandmother used to sing. She wasn't trying to scare him. She was holding on, waiting for someone to remember her. That night, he came home with an old record player and a vinyl of that very song. He set it up in the living room. When the first notes played, she came to him, more vivid than ever. Her eyes shimmered not with tears, exactly, but with something close, gratitude. Elena, he said quietly, you don't have to stay for me. I think it's time. She hesitated, and for a moment, he thought she might refuse. But then she stepped forward, leaned in, and pressed her lips against his cheek. He couldn't feel flesh or warmth, but somehow it felt real. Her voice, barely more than a breath, thank you, and then she was gone, no slow fading into mist, no dramatic swirl of lights, just gone. The house felt different without her, quieter. He missed her every day. Still, sometimes, in the late hours of a cold October night, he'd swear he could hear that melody, just faint enough to make him smile.